as Nigeria looks ahead to 2026. Questions around economic stability, fiscal sustainability, and growth prospects are coming sharply into focus. And to help us unpack what lies ahead for the economy in the year, the risk now, and of course the opportunities and what it means for businesses, citizens, well, we are joined by our guest in the Lagos studio right now, Uwaoma, founder and MD, Xavier Consulting. Thank you for joining us. It's good to see you this evening. Well, let's start on this note. Of course, the new tax reforms have just taken effect January 1, and coming at a time when government is under pressure to boost revenue and businesses are grappling with high operating costs. So let me ask you, what do they immediately mean for government revenue and businesses activity? I'm talking about the tax law that just started.
All right, interesting. Very commonsensical. What we're going to see in the next few quarters would be a spike in government revenue. I like the fact that they kept it modest with the projections in the budget, so that wasn't a major trigger for anything in the budget. But realistically speaking, I think the masses and general populace, they're all aware of the whole tax reform, so it makes it easy and gives them lesser excuses. The truth about it is Nigeria needs to increase their tax base, and I'm hoping that people understand that. In general, it's pro-masses and a bit more heat around middle class and upper middle class. So yes, there'll be bigger revenue for government, but I think the richer people would be the tax collectors, the employees of NRS. I think that's the new name for it now. So the government will get rich, but the officials will get richer because of the disparity in the inefficiency of how they'll drive the compliance, right? I'm hoping that the people on the street are not taking advantage of. So I think that that's it. It would be better for government. I'm hoping also that it makes Nigerians more aware now that they're going to pay tax to hold their government accountable, especially their state government. If you look at the new tax law, you see that multiple taxation has been reduced into having it as a developmental tax, all in one. So I'm also hoping we see how much the states are more empowered with the tax revenue. So we should put more pressure on our local government and our states more than even the federal government, because they're the biggest recipients and winners of the tax law. So yes, we hope to see better infrastructure if the tax is used well and corruption is reduced from all the excesses from that revenue that comes from excessive tax. I'm hoping the markets, especially the businesses, don't push that pressure on the households. There is zero VAT on certain things, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and of course food. But you go to the streets, almost everybody is talking about narrations on food. I'm hoping that people understand that and they're a bit more aware to know what they're being taxed for and what they should not be taxed for, in my own opinion. But generally, it's bigger revenue for Nigeria. I hope it makes Nigeria richer, not at the expense of poorer Nigerians.
I mean, it's interesting that, of course, you highlighted some thought by Nigerians which border around transparency issue. But given Nigeria's slow recovery, we talk about inflationary pressure. Of course, even though the inflation is below 15% now, we also do know that prices of things remain high in the market. And there's also a weak consumer spending as well. Do these tax changes support growth, or do they add pressure to an already fragile economy? What do you think about that statement?
You can look at it in two ways, short-term, long-term. Short-term, it seems to add pressure because of all of the panic that will come from it and how government transfers the risk to firms and firms transfer the risk to households. In economics, called the circular flow of wealth, yes. But in the long term, it would reduce the pressure because hopefully the excess of those revenue would go into infrastructure. Hopefully, that's the key word. So yes, I think that it's supposed to help boost economic growth. Nigeria has always been below standard in tax collection based on how you compare with other emerging and frontier markets. So yes, in my own opinion, I think the tax changes would help increase economic growth. Most likely inflation is fundamentally at 14 to 15%. We hope that by IMF projections and what the federal government is saying, it would hit maybe 12, 13%, which is quite fair compared to just a few years or months ago when we went almost to 30%. So yes, inflation is coming down. The fundamental thing in all of this is not just on fiscal policy, but it's also on how we manage the one trigger to price stability and inflation, which is, of course, is oil. 90% of Nigeria's revenue, import revenue, comes from crude oil. So let's hope that all the complexities happening globally doesn't affect us more. But I really think that it's pro-economic growth. It needed to be done. Like I always say, to make an egg, you must break some omelette. If to make an omelette, you must break some eggs. Yes, we have to do the heavy lifting, but hopefully let's assume that we're paying now to play later, as against playing now to pay later.
Wow. I mean, as you may have seen, there are quite a lot of projections out there talking about the economic outlook in 2026, and projections really are pointing to both opportunities and significant headwinds. So overall, what's your economic outlook for Nigeria in 2026? Positive or cautious?
I think it's positive, but modest, right? Quite realistic. I think we're projecting between 3.8 to 4.0 growth rate, GDP growth rate, which is better than our population growth rate. And that's a very good indicator in macroeconomics, right? We're growing more than our population is growing for the first time. And I think that that's pretty good in itself. If you also compare with our growth rate and the global growth rate, you see that Nigeria is growing faster than the global growth rate. I think the growth rate of the world is less than 4%, less than 3.5%. Nigeria is above 3.5%. So I think that that's looking good as well. We hope that inflation doesn't go up. We see what the government is doing with the monetary policy, the CBN's last quarter body language around MPR without moving the MPR clearly shows that they're also trying to be cautious with overstimulating positivity. So I like the realism and the realistic approach. The Nigerian economic outlook is looking really good, even though we're running a contractionary monetary and fiscal policy type thing that tries to help us cool off all the madness in the economy. In general, the economic outlook is looking good. Our capital market is looking very good. Our GDP growth rate is looking very good. We have a stable oil production in terms of barrels per production per day. And we also have, to a large extent, a good projection of what we might be able to make from that based on what the general projections are. The economy is looking pretty good. There's been standard reforms done. The heavy lifting by this government has already been done. The most strategic reforms, from subsidy removal to, of course, trying to unify our interest rates and our dollar exchange rate. All of those fundamentals are strong, heavy lifting that's been done. Of course, we've also done reforms around other systems, the bank capitalization. So now I think that we're stable. 3 years into this government, there is no trial and error. There is no magic that we're expecting. We expect them to be linear and to just communicate better what they're trying to do. I think we're in a good place. The only trigger I see is the fact that we're going into an election year and all of the madness that comes with that. If that can be managed politically, I think that Nigeria is looking good, better than the average, especially if you compare to other countries around frontiers and emerging markets, right? The only continent that is better than Africa right now in projection would be Asia, right? So I am hoping that this year will be better for Nigerians, but in the end, it's not just all about circle of concern, it's also circle of influence, how Nigerians can influence their businesses and themselves to do better, right? Everything is macro, but the real work is on how effective and how productive Nigerians can be and how much they can drive their goals, in my own opinion. So yes, but it's positive, way positive than last year in general, from GDP to inflation to all the other factors, including employment. So yes, well done, and I'm hoping that nothing triggers a change globally, especially with all the madness going on in the world right now.
I'm also optimistic, just as you are there, but 2026 is set to be another critical, economic year marked by fiscal reforms, and as you have highlighted, so we're looking towards a positive 2026. But specifically now, speak to us. What sector are you looking at growth specifically? What are the sectors that are likely to drive growth in 2026?
Okay, biggest risk to the economy, biggest triggers for growth. Of course, the biggest risk will always be oil and gas, right? Majority of our revenue projections come from how much we can pump oil and how much the world can buy our oil, and more importantly, at what price they're buying. If we take away the non-oil sector, the biggest and most promising industries or sectors would be services. Services would be mostly telecoms, right? Construction, banking. Those are like the three biggest triggers. We hope that even when you take out the upstream explorations, you look at the downstream, you see that Nigeria is also very promising. There's massive expansion around LPG, CNG lines, and also around petrol stations and filling stations. Look around you, too many filling stations are popping up. Finally, Nigeria is refining oil. Midstream is alive again. So I think that if truly Dangote decides to go to the capital market with refinery, that would also be a major trigger. But in total, I would say if you want to look at the most promising sectors, look at services. And if you want to break them down further, look at telecom, look at banking, look at construction. Nigeria is a big construction site. And that's how I like to see Nigeria. Whenever I look at Nigeria, when I come into this country, I always say to myself, this is what Dubai was 20 years ago. The only thing missing is leadership, and I hope we get that right this year.
I hope so. We get that right too. Well, just before I let you go, let's talk about, an event, of course, you're discussing the market outlook. What's that about?
Okay, so I spent the last 14 years building businesses. I'm a management consultant. Core is corporate restructuring. And on the 17th, I'll be at Eco Hotel and Suite with over 100 CEOs just trying to project what the economy is going to look like, not just for the sake of speculations and for the sake of knowledge, but for the sake of application to how they can make their businesses better. Like I always say, there are two circles of concern and circle of influence. Circle of concerns, I think they affect you, but you have no influence over. Everything we're talking about, macroeconomics, you have no influence over. But there are things we have influence over, which is your strategy, your structure, your systems, your people, right? The shared values and your company culture. So we're going to see how you can align all of those things to the macroeconomics projection. So first, it starts with projections, starts with outlook for 2026, macroeconomics, microeconomics, and all that. But it ends up with strategy and structures that can make businesses better. I've done this for the past 10 years, and it's been amazing. My predictions has been very accurate year in, year out. But more importantly, we're looking forward to working with those businesses, hand-holding them beyond just a one-day breakfast session. So it's at Eco Hotel for next 17th of January. And of course, we're moving that whole train to other parts of Nigeria. But 17th, for people who are in Lagos, just check out Xavier, and we'll see you at Eco Hotel and Suite for a breakfast session where we look at the outlook for 2026 and how CEOs and businesses can navigate, not just to survive, but to thrive in the promising economy that Nigeria has. Because truly, Nigeria's economy this year is promising.
Well, it's Uwaoma, founder MD, Xavier Consulting. I hope I got that right. Thank you so much for your time on Arise Exchange.